So the research that you've been doing so far going pretty good.
Really good, really good. Some really interesting info coming through. Um, yeah, I was actually reviewing the best performing results so far, and some real inspiration, which hopefully we can share today, really. But because there are some agencies out there who are really pushing the envelope out on this area around their people and their culture and all that stuff, which I think we all need to be, and very innovative as well, which is great.
Brilliant. Well, don't give too much away, Mike.
No, exactly. No.
Okay. Okay. So it's just coming up to 9:32. So Mike, if you're ready, shall we get cracking?
Yeah, let's get going. Yeah, great.
Fantastic, fantastic. So first of all, welcome to everyone who's managed to join this live webinar. I know a lot of people register for this webinar and look forward to listening to the recording. So if you're listening to the recording on Monday or Tuesday next week, hello from the past. I hope you've had a great weekend. This is my last Friday before I bounce off on holiday on Wednesday. So I'm in a lively end of week Friday mood. Most of you on this call will know me. I'm the MD of the agency work with over 500 agencies, really helping them to elevate their performance. And today is, believe it or not, is the sixth A game we've done. We started this series back in January. So Mike, you're the sixth person halfway through
Privileged.
the year. So I'm really great to have you here today. But just to say thank you to all the agencies that have joined these. The feedback that I've had from you guys has been amazing. The speakers themselves that have come on have had agencies reaching out to ask them questions, to get their opinions, to get their views on the topics they spoke about. So for me, that's a real success. The A game was set up to try to deal with the questions that I get asked in my day-to-day life by talking to agency owners and agency leaders. And the agency works, we exist for the good of agencies. That's ultimately why we're here. So to be able to bring in people that operate in arenas that aren't our specialism, that aren't our areas of expertise, has been really great. So thank you everyone that's joined these webinars over the last 5 months, and I'm really hoping we can keep these moving forward. And I know the program we've got for the next 6 months is really great as well. So my guest speaker today is Mike. Mike is the MD of YouBecome, and Mike, you've really spent the last helping years helping SMEs build high performance in their business.
Yeah.
So, Mike, before we get started, I'm going to give you a word. I want you to try this word on for size, and that word it's a word that's used probably in our industry more than any industry. That word is culture. So let's just let
Yes.
that sit there for a minute. The word I want you to try emphasize is culture.
Yeah.
So before we get stuck into all the good stuff that we're about to talk about, what's your definition of culture, Mike? What does culture mean to you? Because it gets bandied around so much. So what does culture actually mean to you?
Well, look, the way Jay, I get asked this question. You're not you're not alone. And most businesses that I'm talking to right now, culture is probably right at the heart of what they're grappling with at the moment. And I'm sure, come on to that a bit more. But going to your question, I think the way I would define it, and it's, you know what, it's going to sound really, really sort of trivial, but it's the way we do things. And ultimately, every company is different. Every company has its own core values, which they either know or they don't know, but they will play those values out in the way they behave. But ultimately, culture is is how that feels and looks to people, both internally and externally, because whether you like it or not, your culture is perceived by your customers as well. Because that will come through in every member of staff. If there is a really strong culture where people are loving where they're working, the chances are that then every interaction, whether that be internal interaction or external interaction, is a great one. So sorry, I know I'm going on a bit, but ultimately for me, culture is the way we do things. And that is an accumulation of behavior, values, all sorts of different things, all meshed into one.
Okay. So that's a great place to start. I thought there was a key word you also
It's
brought out
huge.
there that most agencies strive to, and that word was differentiation. How are you different to other people? And I think that's quite an important thing in this whole culture strategy agencies have. So why is culture so important for agencies, Mike? Why is so much effort, so much time, so much money put into culture? Why is that a key thing for agencies at the moment? What are your findings on that?
Well, look, I'm going to state the obvious when it comes to agencies, particularly because we've done a lot of work with agencies over the last 2 3 years, actually, and also pre-COVID too, and particularly agencies where creativity, where your people's dynamism, your thinking, your strategy is effectively the product that you're selling. So you don't have a widget. You don't have a sort of yeah, well, in your case it's slightly different, but with you don't have agencies don't typically have software that they're selling or a product that they're selling. They're selling their ideas and their innovation, and therefore people and the way their people are in terms of their mindset, their attitude, their positivity, all of those kinds of things is critical to the product that the agency is selling. And that is all wound up in what we've just discussed in terms of culture. So culture is the way we do things, and that's the differentiator. And therefore, culture has to be a massive focus for every agency, because if that's great, then the chances are your product is great, which is the chances are therefore you are being profitable, you are being successful, and being able to differentiate yourself against other agencies.
Fantastic. Yeah, good answer, Mike. So in my day-to-day life, I deal with agencies that are around, the 750 gross income up to 1.5 million, then they grow to 3 million, then maybe to 5. And I work with some agencies that are 50 million gross income plus. And that culture journey, I think, changes as those agencies develop and grow.
Yeah,
So if I think
definitely.
of when an agency is in its inception, probably trying to get those first clients on board, maybe bringing in your first hires, which gets scarier as you grow, and then all of a sudden it becomes, we just need more people, so we'll get them. But when agencies are at that inception and they're just starting off, I find that the culture is often based around the founders' core values and what they believe. But
Yeah.
obviously, as they grow and they bring in different personalities within those hires, and then you get to a point where there could be a senior management team, that culture can change and merge and move away from what those founders' values are. So is there any advice, any anecdotal information, knowledge that you've experienced of how do those businesses, as they grow and develop, retain that culture that have been based around the founders' values, but then develop out from that?
Yeah, it's a great question because Jay, what you're describing is a typical journey. Look, and you'll probably a number of the guys that are on this are listening to this will either they'll be at one of the stages of this journey. One, either a small agency which is successful, you seem to be getting some traction, and therefore you are starting to recruit. I would say that the rules of thumb it's a bit like this, which is basically 15 people and below. What you'll see, Jay, is you'll see still and it may be even 20 and below, you're still very much the values and the culture is driven by the owners, but driven by the founder owner of the agency. But there is a big but. Once you start to get beyond 20, what you've got to understand is that you have now got an organism that effectively you have, and that organism has arms and minds and everything of its own, and you cannot ignore that. And so the advice I would give is that certainly things like values and culture must be revisited on a sort of a biannual, basis. You can't just sort of leave it, say we've done that bit now, we've agreed our values, that's it, off we go. Well, because if you, particularly if you're growing, you've got another 10 or 15 people since the last time you went through the exercise. Guess what? They will be bringing in other things to the mix. And so I think it's really important that every agency reevaluates that on not on an annual basis, but on a sort of quite regular basis. And I think going, but to your point, Jay, is that once you get over 20, what you start to have is you have a layer of people between the owner-founder or founders and the team. So you effectively have this layer now of what we call middle managers, whatever you want to call them, and each of those individuals has their own value set, slightly maybe different to the founders. And what you will then find is that sometimes certain teams are getting a different experience of culture and values than another team, and that will be driven by the person that manages them. So it becomes a more complex organism, as you know, because you're going through the same process. And so, ultimately it's something you've got to revisit and really be conscious of.
Yeah, and I think that revisit is really key. And I know, 3 years ago when I looked at our business and I thought we look like an IT company, I didn't want to be like that. It didn't reflect how we operate here. It didn't reflect our personalities at the team at the time. So we went through the rebranding exercise, and we got the team together and we said, well, how do we want to talk? What language do we want to use? The tone of voice. And what really came out was to be real. That's where they sort of be brave, be bold, be real, and don't use business jargon. Talk to people how it is. And the neon you see all in our brand now, hopefully it's not too much neon, so it looks like
it's quite there.
No, it's not too bad, is it? But then we're talking about like the illumination of bringing data and light and knowledge to the agencies we work with. And you're right, we're 3 years on for that. Our team has changed, we've grown, so we're about to do the same exercise, take the team off site and say, right, to get to the next level, what does it look like now? How do we want to operate on a day-to-day basis? How do we want to be seen? So we're about to go through that ourselves, which I think agencies, as you are growing, and for me, Mike, I think it's when you've achieved an objective that you've set and you're going, okay, what's the next 3 years or the next 5? It's at those points that you have to realize.
That makes most sense, Jay. That's a really good point. Is that hopefully that most of the guys here will be working towards a journey focus. There'll be a year, 2, 3 journey, as it were. They might be nearly finished, as you say, nearly where you are, and that's a natural point, because particularly if you've grown since the last time you've done it, which pretty much everyone will have been or done, then it's at that time you really want to reflect. Reflect on what we've been, how we've achieved what we've achieved, but how do we need to evolve and get better? And interestingly, that last little bit feeds into one of the key factors of what a great culture looks like. Would it be useful for me to share that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what we did, Jay, back in 2016, me and my team, we basically looked at what the very best businesses were doing, and that came, as you know, Jay, we've worked with a lot of different sectors. We are working very focused. We're very focused now in the agency sector, but we previously, over the last 20 years, we've worked in lots of other sectors too. But there are 6/7. We're actually creating a 7th. Because of what we're dealing with right now. But what the factors that make a strong culture, number one is a feeling of trust and empowerment. So people working for the business feel as though they are being empowered and trusted to do their job. So that's just good quality people management. So certainly if you've invested, if you do have a new layer of management in your some of those middle guys, invest in that group. Help them to become really good people managers and really understand what that looks like. The second part of a quality culture is a really open and responsive leadership group. And what I mean by that, being approachable, so not being above themselves, being really, really approachable, talkable, anyone, they'll have an open door to anybody and anything. And we see that that those types of leaders are the ones that lead the best cultures. We also look at, there are two elements to this. There's an external focus, and what that means is being really obsessed with your customers and delighting them, but an internal community. So external focus, internal community. And, if you get those two, that balance right, the internal community being we work together, we're all on the same team, we're all trying to help each other out and make sure that we're all doing it for the benefit of our customers. The fourth bit is developing a real learning culture, which feeds into our last one, which is a growth mindset. So those two are very connected, which is we're here to learn and be better. And as a leader, Jay, it's our responsibility to encourage everybody in the business to get interested and learn something, become really, really expert in a particular area of marketing, so they can be the go-to person in the agency for that. But you've got to learn. You can't just expect that to happen. You've got to actually
encourage your team and give them the time to.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what within your framework. I've got 3-4 hours a week for personal development, which helps the agency achieve the objectives and grow and be better for the clients. And
for sure, it's ultimately we've got to realize that if we're going to give our guys some time to learn, to become better or expert in a particular area, who are the benefactors? It's the customers ultimately that are going to be the benefactors of that, and that's the whole idea. I think I would say just obsessive communication is the sixth part of that jigsaw, which is where from people like ourselves down, we've got to be obsessive about how we communicate, and that's meant in a positive way, in that we communicate, almost over communicate rather than under communicate, and also make sure and encourage that different parts of our different teams, because obviously most agencies will be broken up into multiple teams, that they are being open and communicative and collaborative as well, because that's one of the hardest things to connect is sideways or horizontal communication. So that's a sixth bit. And the one bit which we're really focused on, which would be interesting maybe for us to chat about, is I call it's developing a collaborative community. And because one of the things which we've been talking about a lot, Jay, and I'm sure everybody on this call will feel, is the fact that since the pandemic.
Are you going to use the C word?
Which one do you mean? Oh, no, I wouldn't dare. Well, I wouldn't do it, Jay. But since that time, I would say agencies of all of the different types of clients we've worked with have probably felt that the most in terms of the change. And what I mean by that is that the change, which of course I don't have to tell you this, which is that change between home working and office work, and the dynamic and the impact on culture that has had. And you've now got a generation of people, who started during COVID. My son, who's now 26, started his job in the first week of lockdown. So all he knew and all he's really ever known is working from home with a bit of office work. And so how does a agency, particularly where people and culture is so important, how do they grapple with that challenge? And that for me that's why we're doing this research project that we can maybe talk about at some point, but which is this particular key challenge, which is how do the best agencies do this, and how are they adapting to this new phase of work?
That is really interesting. I mean, it comes up in all the conversations I'm having with agency leaders. We'd like people back in for the culture, but then people feel like they want us to come back in to monitor what we're doing. Actually, productivity through COVID increased hugely. Utilizations went up, recoverability of money, so productivity was higher than any other time. So I don't think agency leaders do think people aren't working at home. I think it genuinely is about maintaining and building that culture. There's an interesting stat, and I don't know what period this is from, but we know that the agency world, the agency landscape, has a higher staff turnover than most other sectors.
Yeah.
There was
I
a number.
saw I saw
There's a number from
30%.
the drum. Yeah, the number from the drum was 42-ish%
Yeah.
of employee retention, which is low. And we know the cost of employing people just from recruitment fees, but also from getting the wrong person in if it doesn't fit the culture. All these things have catastrophic or potential for catastrophic events on the agency. So I think that impact of the COVID and remote working, I definitely think that's having an impact as well on this low employee retention.
I think as well, Jay, I think one of the things, and this is, I would try to encourage agency owners to really understand this, which is that you have, like I say, you've got a generation of the younger generation, particularly if you hired particularly younger people through the pandemic, that they are used to working from home, but there's a but here, and some of them are very comfortable there. So I've described this group as an almost institutionalized home workers working from home. Now that we have to ask ourselves, is that in their best interests? I would challenge the fact that no, it isn't. But there is another but, which is how do we encourage them? How do we help them realize that it's in their best interests to not be stuck at home every day, and for them to be able to feed off the energy of their team and their colleagues, and that they can learn and all of those kinds of things. And one thing I looked at the very best results we've had so far, Jay, in our research, and the agency, I won't name them because I haven't got their permission to do so. I'm sure she would be absolutely fine for me to share the name, but I won't. Yep. But I was reading through some of the comments of some of her staff, and they are very interestingly, they've always been a remote agency. They've never had an office, as it were. So this agency owner has driven an unbelievable culture, but she's managed to do it in a remote way. And I think that one thing she has agreed with me to do is to do something like this, a podcast, a video webinar, where I can just pick her brains, because I think we can all learn. I mean, her results are just off the charts good. Everybody in that business, you read the comments, is just loving being there. And I've written a few things down. Is asked about culture, multiple people said we all own it. And I think for me, Jay, when you do that exercise, which you're just about to do, is the great thing is if you get everybody involved in that conversation, it's not you for you to decide. You've now got 20 plus people to decide.
I've decided I'm not even going to be there. Myself, right. Steve, the owners, we're not even going to be there and say, this is our North Star of where we'd like to get to next. But you tell us how you want to operate to get there. How?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And I've said to them, everything's on the table. You've got to balance that up with commerciality. And if you can prove the commerciality of working that way, then let's do it.
Absolutely.
So that'd be interesting to see what they come back with after.
Yeah, you look, and that's brave. Scary, brave. Yeah. I'm sure you are thinking, oh, what have I done here? But I think that's a good idea, Jay, because at the end of the day, if the more people feel bought in, to the culture, to the way you do things, then the more likely is they are to perform. And that ultimately is what all business is about: is getting the very best out of everyone that we employ.
For the good of your clients, ultimately.
For the good of your customers.
And I think if you do that, then your own employee retention does go north of that 42-43%.
Absolutely.
So, Mike, we try to finish these things a couple of minutes before 10 o'clock because fairly senior people on these calls, and they need to get up before they jump onto the next call. And I'm on the same here. So, we've mentioned this survey that you've been involved in, and you reached out to me because of my contacts across the agency world, and I was more than happy to get involved in this because I think it's genuinely for the good of the industry. So do you just want to spend a couple of minutes just explaining, what you've been doing, how we've been working together, and what's been happening really over the last 2 to 3 months? Yeah.
Well, as you know, Jay, because we understand this is such an important conversation, as in around culture, people, and how that interacts with productivity and ultimately the results of the business. We as a consultancy like to be data driven, fact driven, and also like to be able to understand what the very best organizations are doing in an industry. And so we are doing some research which is asking the question, what do agencies need to do given the changes that every agency has had to deal with in terms of the workplace? How do they lead their people over the next 2 to 3 years? And what we're doing is that we're offering to any agency that wants to take part a fully administered, free, I have to say that through gritted teeth, but free, no, I'm only joking, free employee survey, which we would normally charge 4 to 6K for, but we're not going to do that, where we ask a set of about 40 questions to every employee related to all the things that we've talked about on this call, Jay. So feelings towards culture, feelings towards collaboration, feelings towards their leadership group, the new way of working, everything related to what we've talked about, to try to understand how well is that agency doing at this moment in time, but also be giving that agency the ability to compare and contrast themselves with every other agency that takes part. At the moment, we've worked with we're about 17 with about 3 or 4 more to launch next week. So we're up about 20. Our big goal by the end of the year, we hope, is to get somewhere between 70 and 100 agencies to be part of this project. So basically, and what we'll be doing is basically providing every single agency a full understanding of how they're doing, but obviously giving them some sense of it's all very well about how you're doing, but it's what do you need to do as some next steps moving forward to really change the game for your agency. And so we're offering that as part of this research project. And so and we started about 3 months ago, as you know. You've been awesome, Jay, and and that's fantastic. Anyone who wants to be involved in this, we'd love to talk to them, because we believe for the agency world, this is a massively important piece of research.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I mean, I know we did it in our own business, and I think we've got a pretty good culture here. I think the results that came back echoed that. My feeling.
I agree.
There was definitely 2 or 3 things that I was like, we could be better on. And actually, if we don't jump on that now, those 2 or 3 things could start to stifle, get out of control, which then starts affecting other areas of the culture that are good. So it was definitely worth having that data and then being able to do something about it. And that offsite where my team are going, the sort of the senior management team here that are going to be running that, they've absolutely got visibility of that to say, well, how do we deal with these things that you've mentioned? They're not the end of the world challenges, but the fact you've mentioned them means they're not as good as they could be. What does that look like for you then? How do you want to address them, rather than me looking and going, right, I know what we'll do here, because that's only my plan. So it needs to be their plan. So absolutely, the data we got from it was superb. Well, I can put some stuff out to everyone on this call, Mike, so they've all got
great,
knowledge of how to get hold of you. So
that's all they need. Just pick up the phone, and then we'll be here.
Mike, we've got 1 minute left. So just quickly, one piece of advice, one key takeaway. What would it be?
Oh golly, for me is to put culture right at the heart of your business. It's your special sauce, and if you haven't invested the time yet in really considering what that is for you, then you need to, and really put an effort in there.